Welcome to Interviewing Basics. Today I want to teach you how you actually do an interview that's going to get you the job. I've done thousands of interviews and the same mistakes are made time after time again. Today we're going to go through what kinds of things should you talk about in an interview? What are the fatal errors that you make in an interview? How do you prepare and create what I call pocket examples that you can use and then pivot into those so that you can prepare for an interview and basically lead the interview dialogue. I also want to talk about how do you end the interview in a really strong way. And lastly, what about pay? What do you do when they bring up pay? So let's dig into the first module. Here we go. Let's talk about the 3 fatal flaws for interviews first. Number 1, people use too many buzzwords. And I think we do it to sound like we know what we're talking about, but they have the opposite effect. When you use too many buzzwords, the sentence just sounds strung together, but it's really hard to get out of it what the content is that you want to leave somebody with. The other thing is people ramble. They just ramble on and on with an answer. And as an interviewer, it's really difficult to sort out from what somebody is saying what they really want you to know and where they're headed. The third thing that people really struggle with in their interview is they're much too broad. I'll show you examples of how being too broad can hurt your interview. A lot of people think mistakenly that if they throw in everything they've ever done, that surely the company is going to be excited about what they have and they'll eventually hit on something that's important to the company. It's like throwing spaghetti against the wall to see what sticks. Your job is to do enough homework on the company so that you can speak very specifically to what the company needs. Let's go through each of those and let me explain what good looks like and what bad looks like. So let's talk about buzzwords for starters. I want you to think about positioning what you're saying as a third grader would. And I know that sounds odd, especially for a senior executive that's listening. Found that the higher you go, the more we try and use big words to explain what we're doing, and it's not necessary. So rather than saying, well, I'm a project manager who really tries to take all of the excess waste out of the processes, and I continue to help refine and revise those so that the stakeholders are happy and so that we can really collaborate strongly on the project, which, by the way, you lost that person second 2 into that sentence. You can be far more clear to say, I'm a project manager who runs projects on time and under budget, for example. That's the third grader language that I'm talking about. And as we dissect the way you talk about yourself, the goal will be to take some of the common mistakes people make and really dissect it down so that you can make better statements about yourself. Let me give you an example of being overly broad. I'm an HR professional. And if I go into an interview and I say, well, I've had 25 years of experience running HR. I've run compensation, benefits, talent management, and I am looking for an opportunity to run HR in a bigger company or a different industry. That's not very exciting, first of all, and especially for a company that's trying to hire an HR person for a specific need or problem they have. How much better would it be to position myself as, I'm an HR person that works in companies that go really fast, that have high growth trajectories, and they're trying to put in place the infrastructure to help them grow faster. I'm also the person you'd hire if you're trying to go public. Now, all of a sudden, as niche as that is, I've just made the most compelling value proposition in the world to the right company. And that's what I'm asking you to do, is figure out what you're good at and talk about it in a way that's really compelling. That brings me to the word value proposition. Most people, that just sounds like white noise, but let's talk about value proposition. A value proposition for a company says, this is the problem I can solve for you. Not only what I know, but how I do the job. Now, most people will use their value proposition in a very generic way, like the example I gave you. It may be, I'm a mechanic. I'm a marketing person that does well in social media. I'm somebody who is an operations expert in a company. I'm excellent with customers and a technical support customer manager. That is not a value proposition. What begins to create a value proposition is talking about how you do the job differently. So let me pull out from the previous example I used a couple of things. How do I do the job as an HR person? Well, you know that I'm the person that you would hire if you want to go fast, put infrastructure in place, or to have a merger acquisition strategy. But what you don't know yet is that I'm a person who is very experimental. I absolutely love to try experiments with companies. And I always ask the question, why do we always do it that way? For example, I eliminated performance appraisals at year end because I thought there was a better way to help us communicate. I also am somebody who cuts to the chase, and I like to just say what I hear people saying so that we can cut through all the crap and get things done. That doesn't mean that I'm known to be brusque or difficult to work with, but I'm known to be a truth teller in an organization. Now, all of a sudden, between what I do well and how I do it, I suddenly have a value proposition. So your first assignment is to write down, what kind of company would hire me? What kind of company am I best suited for? For me, small to medium, because I'm going to help a company grow, help them go public. What kind of company would you be best in and why? Is it because you wear a lot of hats and know a lot about a lot of different topics? Is that why you're good? Or are you somebody that has very deep knowledge in one particular thing that one company needs? Are you a salesperson that excels in finding new channels to market to? Think about what it is that you do best. And I want you to write down 3 things that you do very, very well in your job. The second thing I want you to do is write down, how do you do the job? What is your style, your work style? Are you a manager that's collaborative? Are you a manager that likes to bring other people in and promote from within? Are you a manager that likes to experiment? Are you a manager that is more of a project manager or excels in doing remote management of employees? Think about how you do the job. Once you've written 3 of those down, I want to ask you the question, how do you know you do that well? The how you know you do that well is going to translate into a story, and those stories are going to become the basis for your interview. I want to show you a resume. If you look on screen, you're going to see a typical resume. And the reason I'm showing you a resume when we're talking about interviews is because the same problem that exists in your interview exists on resumes. Look at the top portion and how this person talks about themselves. Look at the summary statement, full of buzzwords, very generic, and then as you scroll down through their work experience, you see nothing except a job description. Now look at their skills, more buzzwords, they're everywhere. This may be a well-written resume in some regards, but it isn't a compelling resume. Now let me show you the difference when you make a couple of changes. And these are the changes we're going to incorporate into your interview. Now I want you to look at the new section. Look at the claim to fame. Everything on that claim to fame is all about results, outcomes that this person has achieved. And they're leading with the outcomes that they achieved. Suddenly, I have proof points to believe this person knows what they're talking about. Let me transfer over to the other side. Instead of just talking about skills that they list one by one, look at how they've replaced that with references, short, concise references from people that have worked with them. Again, more proof points. Now, what I want you to take from this resume is that more specific is better. Outcomes and results you get always trump words. And we are going to drill into how to create those right words for you. Before we go into the construct of actually putting your interview together, I want to talk to you about some of the ground rules of interviewing. The first one is, don't just take an answer that sounds good on paper that somebody else has used, because interviewers can smell an inauthentic answer a mile away. I want you to use authenticity. The second thing is, remember, the goal of the interview isn't just to answer the question, it's to make them believe you. And you make them believe you when you share specific examples, which is why pocket examples are so darned important. And the third thing is, when you're interviewing, the goal is to create a conversation. Rather than just wait for somebody to ask you a question and you answer and wait for the next question, I want to teach you the art of the pivot. to pivot by asking them a question in return, which they will give you clues to what's important to them and help guide the next answer to your question. The last rule of interviewing is please don't talk about what you want to make in the beginning of the interview. It's like defining the diamond ring you want when you get proposed to on the first date. Your goal in this interview is simply to confirm that the range of pay is in the ballpark. Reserve specifics for when you are left last man or woman standing or there's only a few people left. The way that you do that is very simple. When they say, what pay were you hoping to get? Or what is your expectation around pay? Pivot and say, I think it's a great question you're asking because I don't want to waste anybody's time in the interview. Would you mind telling me what the range of pay you've slated for the job is? Hopefully, they'll give you the answer to that, to which you can then say, it's high, it's low, it's in the ballpark, we should continue talking. And then when we get closer to believing that we're a fit for each other, then let's get into more detail on that. That's the best way to do it because the minute you throw out a number, that's the number you're kind of stuck with. And you could find through the process of interviewing that the company pays much more or is willing to pay much more for the role. Or you may have other things happen where other companies reach out and they are paying more for the position and you just did yourself a disservice by laying out what you want to make. Now, what you can't do is say, I won't answer that question. Not okay. I've had so many CEOs say, what is it with people saying, I don't want to answer that question? Even though it's illegal in many states to ask what you were making, companies will skirt it by just saying, what do you want to make? So if they outsmart you in that question and aren't willing to say the range of pay, then I want you to make sure you're prepared. Make sure you're prepared with a range of pay for the skills that you have by doing your research on the internet. Here's a slide. I want to put these names up on the board so that you can see where you can go to find competitive market data on your particular role. Hopefully you don't need it, but possibly you will.